gavel. Good morning. It's Monday, August 17th, and this is a regular meeting of the Eugene Planning Commission. Welcome, everybody. We've got basically one item on our agenda for the day, and then I'll just check in with staff at the end to see if there's anything from commission or staff. But we are also going to have public comment at the beginning of the meeting, so I'll see if anybody's here for that. But we're going to be covering a work session on the urban reserves options, and this is obviously a continuation of former meeting where we had this conversation. So the reason we carried this over largely in part was because we wanted to give a opportunity for the public to chime in if they had anything to say. So with that, I will open it up for public comment. The Planning Commission reserves 10 minutes at the beginning of each meeting or this meeting for public comment. The public may comment on any matter except for items scheduled for a public hearing or public hearing items for which the record has already closed. I will use my discretion to limit time if needed, but I wanted to just go ahead and find out from staff if there were any hands raised here. I see.
We do not have any attendees on the call right now.
Okay, I see that. All right. Well, with that, then I will move into our work session on urban reserves, and I believe Rebecca is going to take us through presentation. And again, if you have questions, just go ahead and raise your hand on the thing, or you can do this. I can see you. And I will also remind everybody to not be tempted by the chat feature, as it interferes with our ability to keep public records. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Rebecca.
Great. Thank you, Tiffany. I appreciate it. I just wanted to acknowledge the rest of my team, which is here with us today. Sophie McGinley, who was an integral member of our team working on our suitability analysis and our public outreach, which you heard about last time. We also have hiding behind her screen, Thea Evans, Lindsay, there's Thea, Lindsay Eichner, who is our county planner working with us on this. Heather O'Donnell has popped up. She is our lead on our growth monitoring project. We have, and we have Emily Jerome as well, who has also already said hello and is an important member keeping us on the straight and narrow with our state regulations. So I don't have much of a presentation because we spent a lot of time presenting at the last meeting, and I really appreciate having time with Commissioners Ramey and Taylor on Friday to get them up to speed. But there are a few questions that came up since the last meeting that I wanted to spend a little bit of time going over, because I thought it might be helpful for us to get on the same page with that. And then I will turn it over to you all for questions and conversation. So I'm gonna get my screen up. Can you see that? Questions since the last meeting? Okay, great. I'm gonna get organized here. So this is, let me know if there's any sound issues. But these are some questions that have come up about the differences between urban reserves and the UGB and how urban reserves planning affects the UGB expansion process. Also some questions on House Bill 2001 and about a 20-year option. So I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about that. A lot of this is going to be refresher for some of you, but I think it's good to hear it again. So this is a little bit of a reminder of why we're undertaking urban reserves planning and how it differs from work with the UGB expansion process. There are some reasons we believe urban reserves equals good planning for growth. Without urban reserves in place, future UGB expansions would likely be limited by state law to exception areas, which are shown on this map in the brown. They're these little brown areas that you can see scattered around. They mostly include rural residential lands around the city, the outside of the city, excuse me. The problem is many of these areas are already developed to some degree, and they have a low likelihood of redevelopment if brought into the urban growth boundary. You may remember from the UGB process that our study showed most of these lands are extremely expensive to serve and may not meet our community's needs for growth in the future. This is an important point because if we don't have urban reserves in place when there's a need to expand our urban growth boundary, then our choices will be limited to these exception areas. Urban reserves will give us additional options for smart growth and for meeting the goals of Envision Eugene if and when there is a need to expand. So we shared this graphic at the January open houses that we held around our study area. It was in response to questions about the differences between urban reserves, the UGB, and the city limits. Again, a lot of this is refresher for you all. But this shows in green all of the land that's potentially suitable for urban reserves, not the final urban reserve area, obviously, since that hasn't been determined yet, but are suitable lands. The dashed black line is the urban growth boundary, and the gray area are the city limits and the incorporated area. So the pie chart that you'll see up here represents urban reserves in the future. When there's a need to expand the UGB, we would evaluate and then bring in only those areas of the urban reserves that are needed, such as for housing or jobs. So we would bring in slices of the pie at a time, not the entire urban reserve area. And this is
Rebecca,
another, yep.
Really
Sorry.
quick, I do have Commissioner Fragla. She raised her hand, and I just wondered, are these folks, can you tell me if these are questions for this, or I'll let you go ahead and answer, because go ahead, Commissioner Fragla.
I just needed to test my sound because I was having a problem with it. So I don't have a question. So can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yes.
Great. Thank you. Sorry for the
That's okay. And then Commissioner Beeson, go ahead, and if you have a question about something specific.
I do. I'll try to make it real brief. I think only have one question today. So back kind of when you first started talking, Rebecca, about some of this criteria here, I guess the question I had as I was going through everything, if the council was to select the 27-year option, for example, and then 15 years from now, or 10 or 20 years, and we're out there as a city and we're looking to expand the urban growth boundary. Because of that decision, would we be precluded as a city from looking at any other land besides what is in the 27-year option?
Good question. We would not be precluded, but there is an order in which we would need to do the analysis per urban growth boundary guidance. So the first priority areas that we would look at for inclusion in the UGB would be that 27-year urban reserve, or whatever urban reserve you selected,
right,
plus exception areas that are not in urban reserves. Both of those are the first priority lands you would consider for
Okay.
urban growth boundary expansion. If you couldn't find any suitable land within your urban reserves or your exception areas, those brown rural residential areas I showed you in the last slide that I can't get back to right now, then you look at marginal lands, these here. Then you would look at marginal lands and then outside of the urban reserves, and then you would look at resource land, farm or forest land outside of the urban reserves.
Okay, that answers my, thank you, that answers my question.
Okay. I just have a few slides, so it might be easiest just for me to get to cover these questions, and then I'm happy to take whatever questions.
Yeah, I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna have
Okay.
Rebecca go through, and then Dan, Commissioner Isaacson, I'll call on you next. So just hang out. Okay. Hang on for just a second. Go ahead, Rebecca.
Okay, so let me see where we are. So this is our growth monitoring and urban reserves graphic, which Heather may want to elaborate on a little bit later, but it's also in your packet. It's the last attachment in your packet. It shows how we're coordinating these two programs. Shown on the left is growth monitoring. As you know, we're setting up this program to monitor our growth, and we will be producing annual reports where we will be able to identify whether we're growing faster than anticipated inside the UGB. So if we are, we move here to this middle section to the UGB analysis. We'll then analyze whether there's enough land inside the UGB to accommodate our growth, or whether we need to initiate efficiency measures to incentivize growth inside the UGB. That may provide us with enough land inside the UGB, and if so, we go back to monitoring. However, if we still need more land, then we'll look to urban reserves, and that's this last section here on the right. We'll analyze the urban reserve area for specific needs like jobs or housing, and we will bring it into the UGB incrementally, like I talked about in the previous slide. So we've gotten a number of questions from the public as well about how House Bill 2001 will affect all of this. In theory, House Bill 2001 should allow Eugene to develop more densely, which could mean that it would take longer for the city to need to expand our urban growth boundary into urban reserves. Or it may reduce the amount of land that's needed when undertaking the next UGB expansion analysis. However, there's no way at this point to know future development patterns and market conditions. Because of this, the bill states that local jurisdictions can increase their density estimates by no more than 3% after the implementation of the bill. The 3% increase may reduce the amount of land needed at the next UGB expansion analysis, as I noted. These House Bill 2001 code amendments will be finalized before June 2022, and they will begin to take effect then. So this is the question about the middle option. Where's the middle option? Because we have this 30-year option, that's the largest allowed by law, and that we were directed to start there. And so we also felt that it made sense to look and see what a 10-year option looked like, since that's the smallest option allowed by law. Then those two middle options, the 27 and 29-year option, those made the cut, so to speak, as they, so we started with 8 options and evaluated a whole bunch, ended up with these other two that take soil classification and farmland preservation into consideration. That's why they were selected. We weren't trying to hit a year target with those. The land that was available and that was suitable dictated the size. So, however, there was an option that was roughly in the middle. It was this 18-year option. So this option includes farm and forest properties with the 2 lowest land classifications. The 10-year only includes the class 6 land. This includes class 4 and 6 farm and forest land. You will see the green are the areas that would be urban reserves, and the red are the areas that are removed from consideration. This land pattern created these islands of urban reserves that were difficult for future serviceability, in a similar pattern to the 10-year option, which is why we didn't bring forward this 18-year option as a choice for the public to provide input on. So that's the end of my refresher presentation. I just want to remind folks that we're here for answering any questions and discussion, looking for a recommendation on a preferred option. And later in the fall, beginning on September 21st, we're going to Council and Board of Commissioners for their direction to staff on a urban reserve option so that we can proceed with the formal adoption process at that point. So I'm going to stop sharing my slides unless there are images or maps that people would like to see.
There may be questions related to those, so I will defer to you, but I do have 3 folks in the queue at this point.
Okay.
Commissioner Isaacson, you're up first.
I can't hear you. Can other people hear?
Hold on. Yeah, I haven't heard. Commissioner Isaacson, are you speaking? Sorry. I actually can't see. I don't have him muted.
Right. You don't look muted.
No. We can't hear you. Let me go to Commissioner Taylor, and then we'll see if we can. Commissioner Taylor. Kristen, go ahead.
Hi, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. I just wanted to let staff know, especially Rebecca, for taking, and Sophia, for taking time on Friday to give us an update of what happened on August 3rd. And I also wanted to acknowledge, I don't think I say this enough at meetings, is that I do have a high level of understanding, just because professionally and educationally, where I'm coming from in the field of architecture and then planning, a high level of understanding of what's going on. I also have been a planning commissioner through the UGB process, as well as the beginning discussion of urban reserves and the next steps, as well as various committees over the years. So I do, sometimes I'll jump into details, and what I really want to emphasize, and I'll do more often, so that the public has an understanding of kind of where I sit, is that one, I appreciate the thoroughness of staff, both through the UGB and Urban Reserve process. I think the presentations are very thorough. The public outreach seem to be quite successful. And I know we're always working on how to get more people to participate. And it seemed like actually with COVID and some of the virtual opportunities, those there was a wide or a bigger participation. So I wanted to say great job. I had a few questions that were able to be answered on Friday. So that's, I wanted to just say that, and I appreciate and respect staff's thoroughness, and I don't have any further questions. And that's all I have to say.
Well, thank you, Kristen. I do have Commissioner Fragala, but I wanted to circle back to see if Dan was able to wait. Oh wait, there you are. Okay, he's on his. It looks like he's on a phone now.
Yeah.
Commissioner Isaacson, go ahead. Yes, we can hear you now.
Yay.
Go ahead.
Technology, wonderful. So this process started in winter of 2018, and we're approaching 2 years to get to where we're at now. So this is kind of a long process to get into my question. So if this has already been covered in a previous meeting, so forgive me. When this started, we didn't have HB 2001, and that's changed things on probably how this would have been designed had we known that information when the process was started in 2018. And given that there are a number of variables that we still don't have worked out that relate to that, and that the growth projections for the city are what they are, and that just because that's included in the 20 and 9 and 30-year plan doesn't mean it will be absorbed into the UGB. Why wouldn't you want the largest possible pre-qualified plan put in place, so that if the direction is to go with a 10-year plan, for example, and we run into issues with the next 6 months or next year of putting together the details from HB 2001, and now we have to go back to the drawing board, we don't start that clock over again of 2 years, or have to go down a road that we wouldn't necessarily have gone down had we had a 30-year plan. So I wasn't sure if there's some logic there that I'm not being able to connect the dot there.
So the question is, why not just a 30-year plan? Yes, that is, I mean, there are a variety of points of view. So I'd welcome to hear from anyone else what they think. But we strove to provide a variety of options to choose from. Primarily because farmland preservation is a very important it's very important to a lot of people in this community. We heard, it was the one comment we heard the most from anyone in our survey, which is not statistically valid, but it is a good touch point on our community. More comments about farmland preservation. A lot of folks who came to our meetings concerned about land conservation and preservation. And so in order to provide a range of alternatives, we felt that it was important, not only because the state allows you to pick a range in sizes, but because we know that that is important to a large number of people in our community. So that's why we put those options out there. Although you can select for that, you can take that, and even if you had the 30-year plan, you could take those considerations into effect when you're selecting urban growth boundary land from urban reserves at the next round of analysis as well.
The last follow-up question I have would be, this has obviously been done in the past where we've come up with a 30-year plan 30 years ago, or it was a 10-year plan or whatever. How accurate was the plan to what ultimately was the land that was needed?
Oh yeah, that's a good question. Well, we've actually never done an urban reserves before. So this is totally new for us. It's new for most places in the state. Not many people have done it at all. But we do know that population projections are never exactly right. They are, I would say, almost always wrong one way or another. So we need to take projections with a grain of salt, that they're the best information we have right now to go by. And they're in fact the only projections we can use based on state direction, state law telling us that this is what we need to use for our population projections. So it is definitely something that it is important. It's a reason why it's important for us to have our growth monitoring program, because we can update more at real time what's actually happening on the ground. So we know whether we need to change how we're planning faster than this very large planning window.
Thank you.
Sure. Does anybody else want to add anything on that? Okay.
Okay. So I have Commissioner Fragola followed by Commissioner Borofsky.
Okay, great. So I have some sort of related questions to what Commissioner Isaacson was just asking. So, but mine are more about the technical analysis, because all of this decision making is based on the technical analysis. So when you did the technical analysis, you used density factors that are based on current density within the city. And you use density factors in the UGB analysis that were reflective of 2012 density. And so I'm curious how HB 2001, which impacts will potentially and hopefully impact the density of the city, how would that have changed the technical analysis? Do you think it would have changed it? Am I like just totally off? I'm trying to wrap my head around the fact that our technical analysis may have contained potentially a much lower bar of density.
Sure. Our technical analysis was based on the same analysis, or the basis was the same analysis that we did for our buildable lands inventory and our urban growth boundary analysis that was just completed, finalized, adopted in 2018. So it was the best information that we have to go on now. Knowing that, you're absolutely right. House Bill 2001, which is going to impact our code in the future, will likely direct us to grow more densely. And so then if we do grow more densely in the future and our development patterns change in the city, then we will be able to take that information as part of our urban growth boundary analysis, and that will be incorporated in our new buildable lands inventory at some point in the future. If we rerun it again soon, it wouldn't have an impact. But at some point in the future, after it's implemented and on the ground, and we see development trends changing because of that, it will change our density. So if we had done urban reserves, let's say 10 years in the future instead, we would be basing our projections and our density assumptions on those instead. But because we don't have those to go on now, we are going to be using those in the future for how we actually expand our urban growth boundary or consider expansion. Like I said before, whether it may impact us by not needing to expand as much or not needing to expand as fast. We just don't know. It just depends on how we actually grow based on that updated code. Terry, I saw Terry's mute button off.
Thank you. I just wanted to add a little bit of context from the UGB adoption process in 2017. Very similar questions and issues came up as we neared the completion of the UGB analysis, because we got a new population projection and we were starting to collect data on housing mix and development. And folks asked that exact same question. What if we updated our assumptions and used the newest data? And we had a long conversation about that and eventually landed on keeping our assumptions intact so we could actually finish the work, and starting urban reserves based on those same assumptions, because we know they're going to change, but like Rebecca said, we don't know how. And so we can't update one assumption without updating all of them. And until we have that information to go on and it's a solid technical analysis, that's not going to work. That being said, House Bill 2001 is a new law, and we would not have designed the urban reserves analysis any different if we had had that law passed 2 years ago, because of the reasons I just explained. So it is being accounted for and will be in our future analysis, but I wanted to give you that reassurance that the same questions came up during the UGB, and we hopefully have provided the methodological explanation for why that makes sense. It just reminded me of a sort of deja vu feeling. I'm sure Heather is having the same feeling. Yeah, I think that's
I totally get all of that. I think having an understanding of that, what the dynamics there is helpful for me in evaluating my thinking about the options. So I do have another question about the number of acres in relationship to the information that was in the urban reserves technical analysis. In the urban reserves technical analysis, it said that the land needed for 30 years was 5,868 acres. And so the 27-year option has 5,940 acres in it. So I'm wondering why in the technical analysis, when the amount of land that was needed for 30 years was identified as just over 5,800, the 27-year option has just over 5,900 acres identified. Why is there a difference there?
Sure. Do you remember where you saw that 5,800 acres? I think I can.
You remember the boxes that had the proportional amounts in it? Yeah.
Yes. So since then, we have updated those numbers. That is the original land need number. What happened is that we created a land need not based on the specific land selected. So it was based more on general averages. Once we found which land was suitable, we reran our land need number based on the actual land available. And what we found was that because probably of the amount of smaller parcels, higher elevation, hillier parcels in the whole southern area of our study area, those density assumptions for residential went down a little. So what it meant is we actually needed more land for our 30-year land need. And so that changed our land need from about 5,800 acres, as you saw in our earlier work, to about 6,300 acres. So that's that discrepancy there. So it's interesting because you'll see that like on the 10-year option, those average residential assumptions for capacity, and they're just really, technical guesstimates, they go down because the land selected is assumed to be able to have a lower density assumptions on them. So for the 10-year, we actually need a little bit more land than we would normally if we were just doing flat averages, not looking at the actual land. I think that's the discrepancy.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Okay, I have Commissioner Borofsky followed by Commissioner Taylor.
Thank you. And great work on staff. Again, like Kristen, I've been plugged into this for several years now in many different iterations, including sitting on the technical advisory committee. So yeah, Lisa, to your point, staff went through and dug down and looked at, okay, this specific property has 5 acres, but it's got a barn and a house and this. So actually there's only going to be 2.5 acres that are actually buildable. It really got down to almost that type of a detail on a lot of these things, which was quite amazing. The other thing that I think is important to bring up is that we're looking at the window from 2032 to possibly 2062. We've done an analysis and we expanded our urban or looked at the needs for growth within our urban growth boundary, and we've determined that we have enough land within our urban growth boundary to get us to 2032. So this is looking 10 to 30 years past that. So we're not saying that, okay, this is where we're going to grow next week. If at some point there is an analysis after the growth monitoring comes out and that says we need more land, some of the things that are going to be put into that analysis are the impacts of Senate Bill or House Bill 2001 and the 3% increase in density that we can add to our thing. So we'll look at that, look at the impacts to that, look at the real world building permits that show us how and how densely we actually are growing in specific areas of town. So the South Hills will know that we're growing at, we can put 2.5 houses per acre, and out on flat ground, we can put 6 houses per acre. So we'll have all of that. So that's just a little bit of context. One of the questions that I will have to help me make my decision on which option I would like to move forward to the city council is I would like to hear from Lindsay as to what she's heard from our partners at the county, because the other thing we have to know is that this is a partnership with the city and the county. The county also weighs in on this because we're kind of stepping into their neck of the woods. So I really haven't heard what your interaction with the county commissioners are and how they're receiving it. And that would help me in making a decision.
Yeah, I'm happy to comment on that. It's been a little bit since we've presented the project and done a project update before the Board of Commissioners. In the past, though, I think it's on everyone's forefront is affordable housing and creating opportunities for when there is a need for the UGB to grow, that there's opportunity for easily developed land that could be affordable to the population and not at the higher end of development costs, meaning that it's easy to service. The connectivity to the existing city is easily accessible, things like that. So from a couple of the commissioners, the Board of Commissioners, they have really voiced their opinion on bring us the 30-year, bring us the 30-year. It's hard to say though where they're going to go when they actually see these options, because I know that they are also supportive of farmland and the industry around the county. So I'm not sure exactly what their position is as a whole at this point. So I can't say too much more than that, I guess, but I do know that they wanted to see the 30-year option and see what that would be. They think that the population forecasts aren't accurate out that far, but it's hard to say. It's hard to say what those numbers are going to be like in the future.
So for me, then, that kind of helps me get to some places. I mean, we have 2 elected bodies that this will have to go for and be approved by, our city council and the Board of County Commissioners. And it sounds to me, just from, tongue in cheek, and I'm not taking this, Lindsay, that this is the way that the board is going to come down on this, because it hasn't been presented recently. But they have, from what you say, seem to have an interest in making sure that the land that's
John. I think, does anybody else just have him freeze?
We were only to bring in the
Okay.
the higher one. So anyways, that just gives me a little bit of help. Thank you.
Okay, Kristen, Commissioner Taylor, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Rebecca, I had a follow-up question that might help with maybe Commissioner Isaacson's question, and I'm not sure, but it could be good information for the public, is the urban reserve process. So we've got House Bill 2001. We don't necessarily understand the impacts that it's going to have within the UGB. You have a comp plan that's going to come up and need to be renewed in 20 years. And then you've got the urban reserves. So let's say you go through UGB and let's say the 27-year plan is adopted. You get to the UGB process in 20 years. And for that matter, it could be the 30-year plan that was adopted, the urban reserve plan. You get to your UGB, you're doing the full evaluation, you incorporate land. What is the process to update or expand the urban reserve process? So, and basically it gets to what really are those implications of 27 versus 30? Because some of what I'm thinking is, okay, House Bill 2001 is going to likely have an impact on density. So 27 or 30, especially because you've got higher class soils, maybe the conservative approach of 27 is a good option considering we don't know what the impacts of House Bill 2001 are. So what then does that update process look like with urban reserves if for some reason some of those projections are more limited? When would we be able to touch updating the urban reserves?
Yeah, that's a good question. Emily, you might want to jump in, but my understanding is that we can, if directed, update the urban reserves plan whenever we wish. Not that we would wish to do it too frequently. But we could, some communities write in, I believe, RVCOG wrote in their IGA a specific date when they would consider updating their urban reserves, but that's not a requirement. Emily, do you have anything to add with that?
Well, the caveat with urban reserves is that you can never do it for less than a 10-year need. And so in some ways that question could come up, and can we do our urban reserve update now? And the answer could be no, simply because when we do the analysis, we don't need enough to meet that 10-year. You can't just keep doing it for 3 more years, 4 more years. So that could be a factor. And the other thing, Dan, your question made me think of how we've dealt with a similar issue in planning where we overestimated our population growth and planned around an overestimate. And that was in transportation. And we designed a transportation plan to meet a population of, let's just say, 1 million. And when we re-looked at that many years later, after having planned for that 1 million as an example, we recognized that we weren't growing as quickly as we thought we would. And what we did is we kept that good planning in place. We just adjusted our plans to specify that, that transportation system to serve 1 million people is actually, we're not going to hit that million for 10 more years or 5 more years. So the planning served us longer than we thought it would. And so that could happen with urban reserves as well, depending on how numbers go, that we think that this is a 27-year or a 30-year option. But in reality, it could end up being a reserve for us for a longer period of time, shorter period of time. So it's that imprecise, but you have to, the state requires us to put numbers to these based on our numbers now.
Okay, thanks, Emily. I've got Commissioner Ramey and then Commissioner Fragola.
Hello, everybody. I did miss the August 3rd meeting, so I took some time and reviewed the presentation, and then Rebecca and oh boy, I know I was going to do this. Lindsay, no, not Lindsay, Sophie, Rebecca and Sophie. I spoke with on whatever day that was last week. So I really felt like I got caught up. I am superficially knowledgeable about these issues, but having been a long-term Oregonian, I'm well aware of the idea of the urban growth boundary, and I really want to applaud that as a state. I think it's a great thing to do. So I'm glad we're doing it. I will say that I began planning. I'm trained as an architect, but began planning about 25 years ago, and my predecessor at my position explained to me his approach to planning one time. And he said, it's like walking down a long corridor. And you're walking down this corridor, and on either side of you are these doors. And as you're making decisions, stepping down the corridor, you're actually closing some of those doors as you go by them. You're closing options. And what you want to be sure you do as a planner is to be sure there are a lot of options left, at least more than one. And you get to the end of the hallway and there's only one left, that's not what planning is about. So try to think about it in terms of preserving options and not limiting them. So if I apply that analogy to our current situation, as Commissioner Borowski pointed out, it's not really 30 years, it's like 60 years. So this corridor is kind of long, and there's going to be a lot of doors on that corridor. There's going to be a lot of time for us to think about it, a lot of choices to make as we go. And I want to commend the staff, as Commissioner Taylor did, and I really appreciate the work they did. I appreciate the attention, the technical attention to detail is phenomenal. I could spend all day just looking at that. It's fascinating to me, coming from that kind of a planning background. But I also appreciate the way the policies have been woven into it to help us understand how to make decisions. And so for me, having said all that, thank you for bearing with me, I'm really thinking that the 27 years is my first preference, because it gives me that long-term view. There are a lot of doors it's going to leave open for me. But at the same time, I think it begins to close at least one of those, which is those high value agricultural lands that are really part of what I think the whole urban growth boundary, one of the initiatives, one of the ideas was about preserving those types of soils and that quality. And so to me, I looked down the corridor, I got a lot of doors ahead. And I'm okay with closing, one or two, which bring me to 27, because I think that's really important in terms of the policies that the state set. So maybe I'm jumping ahead here, Chair, but that's kind of where I am. I would be in rank order, I'd be 27, 29, 30, and then 10. So that's kind of where I didn't really have any questions. I had all my questions answered, and listening to you talk today, I think it's helped me even more understand where we are. And those would be my preferences, unless I hear anything else in the time we have today.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, I'm going to put myself in the queue really quick, because then I want to have Commissioner Fragola and Commissioner Isaacson back for a second round. I support that. In the ETAC, I think that I really supported the consensus vote that we, because in my I rated those options as well. And my first thought is, why would you not just cast a wide net? You have no idea what's going to happen. Why would we want to take anything off the table, knowing that we've taken a lot off the table already through this process? So that was my thought. But also in thinking about how this community responds, and I know that one of the questions that somebody had asked is, why are we looking at all these different options? And it really does. There are community values, and that farmland is really important. And I know Rebecca did explain that in hearing the process that they've been going through for River Road and Santa Clara neighborhood planning, I mean, that's a really critical to that area. So I was able to support with my vote the 27-year option. And I would say the same thing. I would be supportive of any of those three higher options. I couldn't support the 10-year option because I would feel like it's kind of a waste of time. So if that's helpful to anybody, just having the context, I just thought I'd share that. And then I'm going to go to Commissioner Fragla.
Thanks, Tiffany. So I will say that I am leaning towards the 27-year option also, because it preserves the highest value farmland, and I appreciate what was said in terms of the longevity that we're looking at. I also think it has the logical development pattern. And it was great to see that there was an 18-year option, because I was curious about what was in between. Having been involved as a liaison to the River Road Santa Clara Neighborhood Development Plan, I've sat in on a lot of those meetings, and it is really clear how significant and how important the farmland conservation is to that part of our community. I don't think it's only that community, but it is something that was very, very amplified in their discussions. I think I also support the 27-year option because ETAC was able to come to a consensus, and it had the highest support rating within the community, and it was the least opposed. The 30-year option was the least supported and most opposed. So, but almost 50% of people who participated in the community feedback supported the 27-year option. And I do think that's really important to me. I guess the question that I would ask, and I'd be happy to hear from even anybody who was on ETAC or any of the staff, is what were in the conversations there, what were the primary concerns expressed by ETAC that resulted in the 27-year recommendation? And then I'm also curious what the County Planning Commission has been, what are their concerns? I know that they were not able to come to a clear decision also. So I'm curious what we might learn from their thinking.
I don't see John or Tiffany jumping in, so I will. My take on the ETAC conversation was very similar to what we just heard from Tiffany, is that people were interested in the long view approach. They had been with us for 17 meetings hearing about the analysis, and that was something that I failed to reiterate. We removed a lot of land from consideration to get to this point. So there was a lot of potential land that we were whittling down to get here, and they were with us with that. And so they saw, and I think felt that these areas in general made sense, but I think they also really understood the importance of class 1 soils, high value soils, farmland in our area. And so there was, most of the discussion was around the 27 to the 30. And what I remember hearing from folks was, I could support any of these, but I will go with the 27-year because I think that will have the most support. And there were certainly some people who veered more towards the 30-year, and a number of people who veered more towards the 27-year. And I think that they were very interested in consensus building. And so that seemed to be a theme that we heard. And I welcome either of you to jump in on that if you wish.
I want to say one thing that I thought was helpful for me to put this into context was when you're talking about it in terms of 30-year versus 27-year, that's what I think people get hung up on. It's like, why would, it's just a number of years. But when in fact, the difference is those class 1 soils. So if you think of it in those terms, it's like the option with or without those really high value soils. That helped me really come to the conclusion that protecting those would be in the community's best interest. And so we don't know if it'll be 30-year or 27-year or 50-year at this point. We're making our best assumptions, but so when I remove the timestamp to those answers, that helped me really come to supporting, like, let's just take that farmland off the table, and I was okay with that.
Yeah, and for me, I can kind of echo that, and also kind of tagging on what Lisa heard and what I've heard through the updates we've had on River Road Santa Clara, was able to bring that into the conversation, because the lands that we're removing are basically that direction. If you look at the lands that are going out in 27, they're not lands out in LCC Basin. They're not lands in out west of 11th or whatever. They're lands that are predominantly in the northwest part of our study area. And having heard from the people in River Road Santa Clara and the value that they put on that helped me come to that decision there. And then the other thing is that helped me get there too, is that this has political implications. The people who are going to eventually vote on this are people that will be having to get votes. And so it's also a little bit more palatable in that way. Because I want to see what's best for the city, but also something that can get passed with a consensus of I would hate to see it be a 4-4 vote. I would like it to be an option that we can put forward, that our council can embrace and move forward comfortably. And that's where I felt, how I felt coming down on 27.
And regarding the County Planning Commission, Lindsay can elaborate on this. They voted on 4 different options, and it was a 3-4 split for all 4 of them. So there wasn't a lot of discussion in between. Very different than how the ETAC came to their preferred option. Lindsay has requested of them, and they had 2.5 hours to hear our presentation and deliberate. Lindsay has requested of them to do some thinking about this before tomorrow's meeting and share their thoughts on their preferred option. We've requested, the reason why we requested the preferential voting was to help them, if they couldn't get to a preferred option, to at least give us some good information to share with the Board of Commissioners. There's no requirement for a preferred option from the planning commissions. It's just a helpful tool for the City Council and the Board of Commissioners in expressing your viewpoint. So if they are split, which they may be, then we want to be able to have some good information to share with them anyway. Lindsay, do you have anything to add on that?
No, that summarizes it really well. Well, I guess I do have a little bit. So we definitely have had different commissioners coming from different places. Some were supportive of the 10-year option and the idea that they didn't want to control the area of development out 50 years potentially, which was interesting to hear. And I think maybe if we were, which I might recommend bringing up tomorrow night, Rebecca, is to explain to them what we've discussed today at this meeting is the city can come back and look at this again in 20 years. It's not set in stone forever. You know, we can revisit this if the next generation of people working on this want to change it. And so I think maybe if they understood that, that might sway their position a little bit. I'm not sure. But yeah, we asked them to think hard and put down in writing why they were supportive of their number one reason. Because I think it caught us a little off guard that that each option that they voted on, there was never more than 3 people voting on that in support of the motion. There were a couple people that were also very supportive of protecting the farmland, especially due to the Santa Clara River Road, or the River Road Santa Clara neighborhood plan update and all the policies that are going into that plan, and trying to not have it not contradict each other. So I know that was one of the things that a couple of the commissioners were talking about, is trying not to have conflicting policies where, okay, develop on this prime farmland, but protect it in a different document that's going forward at the same time. So it'll be interesting to hear. I've only received a couple emails back, and I haven't shared those. I'm going to send those out today and post them on our website. But it'll be interesting to hear everyone's positions. There was also some concern that we weren't entering into an IGA with the city right now, and we weren't discussing those details. And we explained that we can't discuss the exact details of what the IGA is going to contain until we know the area where the urban reserves is going to go. I mean, if we go a 10-year urban reserves versus the 30-year or the 27-year, there could be different things. I'm not sure. But that was one of the other topics that came up at our planning commission is who's going to regulate what. And we were very clear that the county will continue to regulate the urban reserves area until it's brought into the urban growth boundary. So.
Thanks, Lindsay. Okay, I have Commissioner Isaacson followed by Commissioner Beeson.
I really want to commend staff on this is obviously a very complex issue, and the report is incredibly detailed. So thank you for, as someone who's kind of coming into this, to be able to be onboarded as quick as I have been. My question on projections: how reliant are we on census data for those projections? Because my fear, which I don't think is not going to be shared by other folks, is that given that we're cutting the census probably short, and just with COVID in general, that the data is going to be at least arguably skewed. How, if it's all of our projections are based on that data, are we going down a rabbit hole here? And that would lead to more of an argument toward the 27-year option, for example, versus the 10-year option, because it gives us more doors open, as Commissioner Ramey has outlined.
So I'm going to let Heather elaborate on the answer to this question, but what the population estimates that we use are pulled together by Portland State University. They are the group that the state has directed to do population estimates and forecasts for all the cities and counties in the state. And they do use census information, but not solely. Heather, do you want to talk a little bit more about their methodology or that program?
Sure. Yeah, they use a variety of sources to come up with their population estimates and also their, so they do that annually. They give us a population estimate annually, which also factors into the forecasts that they will do for us. And I'm not sure if everyone knows, but we'll be getting a new forecast every 4 years. And so that was something that was put into state law once a couple years ago, once they also added that you now have to use Portland State's forecast as the official forecast. And so it's great because it takes away that question about what your source should be for your forecasts. And it also ensures that just like we will be doing monitoring, so will Portland State. They won't be just giving us a forecast when we ask for it, which is how it had been. They'll be giving us all the cities and counties will be getting a forecast every 4 years. And the state's been divided up into regions. And so the other nice thing about that is that if trends start changing one way or the other, because we get this question about whether or not people will be moving here and moving away from here due to climate issues, whatever the issue may be, as trends change, they will build that into their forecast. So they do use some census data, they use some algorithms. They also survey us every year and ask us information about group quarters, building permits, annexations. So that's local city specific information that goes into their population estimates. Thea could talk more about that since she's been the one that's been coordinating the really detailed questions that they ask us about this. And then they also send us a survey right before they do a forecast, asking us about those kinds of trends, also demographic trends locally. That are kind of beyond census data. They also ask us about if there's been any policy decisions that might impact how the area grows. So for instance, if for some reason we had a moratorium on something like annexations, let's just say, just because that's kind of the extreme example. But if you had some sort of policy decision about that, that would obviously impact how the rate at which you're going to grow. So yes, census data is in there. That's something that I think everybody that uses census data, it's not just us, but a bunch of parts of the city for our planning use census data. And I think there is a general concern about how that's going to look, how the 2020 census is going to look, what that data is going to look like. But if there's any consolation, it's the whole country that will have that issue, not just us. And again, that's one of the things about monitoring. I know we haven't spent a ton of time talking about it, but one of the hard things, we can collect the data, but one of the hard things is figuring out when you're actually seeing a trend. So when is it a blip, which may be what happens with the 2020 census data. It may be a blip, but if you look at the averages over time, what is it telling you, right? And so that's some of the things that we will be looking at in monitoring, is not just looking at point in time data. The density discussion earlier about the densities we used were actually not just 2012 densities, they were an average of 12 years worth of density. So from 2001 all the way to 2012. So in the averages, you can actually find a lot of opportunity to smooth out those blips that happen. And so I don't know if that's helpful, but that it is something we're aware of. And these are some of the ways that we can take it into account.
That's very helpful. I didn't think that we would be only using one source of data, but it's nice to know that that the concern is being shared out there, because I know that a lot of people are concerned about it as well. So.
Okay, I appear to be frozen. Commissioner Beeson, you're up next.
Thanks. I wanted to, I guess in response to Rebecca's request for preferences, and some have already weighed in, my preference would be the 27 year. I want to talk about that just a little bit. There's been a number of things said about it, and I concur with them. But it would be 27 for me, and then 29, then 30, and then 10 year would be my fourth option. You know, when I went through the material as best I could, I listened to one of the council meetings. I listened to a planning commission meeting. I've had the presentation. I've tried to gather information as best I can. And I'll be careful with my assumptions here, but I'm not sure I really see a real significant difference between 27, 29, and 30, particularly as it relates to, I guess, population growth capacity out in the past that 2032 date. Appreciate what John said. We're looking at this window from 2032 to 2062, and that's a very long time. And I'm thinking that our dwelling units per acre assumptions, our density assumptions, we've had a bunch of questions on House Bill 2001. I'm assuming House Bill 2001 will have some impact on our density, and I'm assuming we're going to, as the next 10 to 15 years goes by, we're going to be able to grow a bit more densely, and we'll be able to see that. So I looked at option 3, and as I went through them, particularly what jumps out is option 3 does preserve, it's been talked about, the high value land, the high value soils, the class 1 and class 2 land. And I think that's pretty important. I was also reading in there, option 3 is more, it was observed that it's a bit more economical, projected for development than the 29 year. I wasn't sure how it compared to the 30, but I think economical development is worthwhile. And then I guess the other thing where I try to kind of wrap it up a bit is when I look at the survey results, and you kind of go back to, we've talked about this, what I've observed with the city, what you're doing with the River Road Santa Clara, what we're doing with House Bill 2001 as we get started, is we've got a lot invested in, and I think like substantial and thorough public involvement processes that we do. This one's been going on at least 2 years. I've read a number of different dates for when we got started on it, but it's been going on a while. It's certainly a multi-year process and thorough. And there's been, you can see from the survey, you can see from all of the information about it, there's been really substantial public involvement. And my sense is that people who've been interested in this out in our community have had the ability or capability to connect and to provide us with their thoughts. And those thoughts have been documented, those opinions and so on. I think and certainly ETAC, the Triple Bottom Line Group, and I've heard discussion about it today from you all who participated. But I think what kind of comes out in the report is the ETAC board agreed that of the options, the 27-year option was kind of their preferred. I understand this is a city council, a Lane County commissioner decision. I understand that. And I don't want to overstate it, but I think when you initiate a public process as thorough and as extensive as we had, I think it's important to pay some pretty good attention to it. And I think the fact that the survey results, I think were pretty substantially in favor of the 27 year of the people who participated. And I think also the 27 year option, as I went through all the survey results, are at least in my mind, and I'm probably reading this in, but the 27-year option feels pretty consistent with those themes that were expressed out of the survey in terms of preserving high value land, looking at a longer term option, and the idea of increasing density. I think that's going to be a kind of a growing value within the community. So I'm in favor of that we recommend the 27-year option back to the council. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Commissioner Beeson. So 3 folks still in the queue. I'm not sure if that was to serve as a motion, but let's go ahead and get all the questions answered and whatnot. But certainly if there's a motion out there that somebody's comfortable making, I would encourage that. So go ahead. Wait, we're back to Commissioner Taylor. Oh, sorry. Here we have language that popped up. Okay. So I'm going to let Commissioner Taylor go next, and then we'll get to this.
Hello, sorry, I was muted. If you could leave that up on the screen, that'd be helpful. And without being super redundant, I wanted to just explain my preference as well is based on the comprehensive information and processes, most recently as well as historically, and also public participation results, ETAC and Santa Clara River Road process. And obviously taking into account 2 of the kind of unknowns, which I'm going to say there are others, but the 2 more significant in my mind, which are House Bill 2001 and climate change. The difference between 27 and 30, I look at really Commissioner Edwards had kind of explained it, is the class 1 soils as well as others. It's really additional land supply, right? So it's just that additional area. And I think the 27-year allows an opportunity for the flexibility we want in case our projections need to expand beyond the current UGB while maintaining and preserving those class 1 soils. And as we heard, there is some flexibility at that point, for instance, with the update of the UGB to revisit the urban reserves. So I like Commissioner Ramey's analogy of the doors. So I think based on all of the moving parts and more stationary parts, I think there's enough, I feel comfortable enough with the amount of flexibility available to the 27-year plan. So I'd be supporting and preferring 27-year plan, and the order would be 27, 29, 30, and 10. So because of what I've heard from others, I'm going to put a motion out there to move that the Planning Commission recommend the City Council move forward with the 20-year option.
Did you say 20-year option?
20-year?
7.
Oh, okay.
I said 27, but yeah, 27, 27.
27. Perfect. I think we all heard that. Okay. I heard what you heard, Commissioner Borowski at first, so I thought, wait a minute. That's
language, yes.
I can second that.
Okay, so Commissioner Borowski seconds that motion. We did have a couple more folks in the queue, but I will open it up for any discussion and if you want to incorporate your comments in that. So hold on, I have to toggle back just a sec here. I can't see now that Emily's sharing. Okay, so I do still have Commissioner Fragola in the queue as well, so for discussion. Lisa, Lisa, you're on mute, sorry.
I was going to make a motion for the 27-year option as well, so I do not have another comment. I also support the 27-year option based on the reasons I stated before.
Okay, so how about I say this? If you have an item for discussion on the motion, because I have Commissioner Borowski and Commissioner Taylor in the queue. So Commissioner Borowski.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to touch on a point here that regarding the ETAC and its role and how it relates to kind of planning commission's role and how it relates to the city council's role. So I like to think of it as we as planning commissioners dig in to the details. So on this item, we've had several work sessions and come to a decision on this. The ETAC is one level higher than that. We had 17 meetings to come to a recommendation, and we dug into it as hard as planning commission digs into it and then moves it on to city council, because city council has 45 minutes to digest this and come up with a vote. And so I think we've got really good distillation coming down. We've got people who looked at it long and hard, gave that information to us as planning commissioners, which we looked at long and hard, and then can make I think a very well-informed decision, recommendation to city council. So I think that it's been vetted absolutely correctly. And I'm 100% in support of option 3. And I don't even think the ranking part of the second part of this motion is even necessary. I think that on ETAC we got to I think it was 13-2, and the two people's dissent was very well bore out and brought to us. And I think from us, a strong motion on option 3, which I think is where we'll be, is appropriate.
Okay, thanks, John. Kristen, I still have you in the queue.
Okay, great.
Okay, go ahead.
This is a question for staff primarily, and I recognize I'm the one who made the motion without the ranking. And I understand that the ranking is in front of us because it might help provide additional explanation, especially because of the county process that's running concurrent. So what I want to ask staff is this ranking helpful in the bigger process? And if so, maybe just a straw poll vote. I mean, you've already heard from, I haven't been keeping detailed count, but maybe half of us about that ranking. So I just want to hear staff's feedback on that, because I'd be willing to do a friendly amendment if it helps with the overall process.
I think if you are willing to do the ranking, more information is helpful, but it's completely up to you. Emily, did you want to pipe in?
Yeah, I that's fine. I would, to keep it clean, I would follow through with the current motion and then do a second motion for the ranking.
Perfect.
No need for a friendly.
Perfect.
Oh, okay, so Commissioner, well, okay, so I'm gonna just go ahead and call for a vote. So we'll start there, and then we can have discussion of an additional motion. So all those in favor of the motion made by Commissioner Taylor to move that the Planning Commission recommend the City Council move forward with the 27-year option. All those in favor, go ahead and raise your hand. I think we can see you all. Okay, and then all those opposed. Okay, motion passes. And then so Commissioner Fraga, you're in the queue, and I'm going to let you speak, but I was just going to say, I'll chime in with the optional motion. I don't find it necessary, and I think it might confuse the council. But if there was a way to summarize, perhaps, I would be supportive of that, but that's just my 2 cents. I'd be curious to hear if there's a consensus of folks that want to go ahead and push that forward. So Commissioner Fragla, followed by Commissioner Taylor.
Yeah, I actually agree with you, Commissioner Edwards. I feel like a strong recommendation from this Planning Commission that we support the 27-year option. is significant, that we didn't need to do the ranking, that it was very clear through our conversation, and that providing the ranking will be a distraction. I would love for the city to have a sense of what were some of the reasons why this was important to us, and would hope that included in that is, you know, what has been heard in the Santa Clara River Road planning process, which they have also been seeing a lot of. So I personally don't feel the need for the ranking.
Okay, Commissioner Taylor.
Okay, thanks. I did not have on my screen everybody. So I just wanted to clarify when you said it, the motion passed, was it unanimous? Because I couldn't tell. I think you're muted.
Can't see. I saw no hands went up on the objection. So yes, the answer to your question is yes. I saw a unanimous vote.
Okay, great. And then my follow-up question is what I heard from legal counsel as well as Rebecca is that the ranking would help the overall process. I definitely agree with Commissioner Edwards and Fragola, although I do see the benefit of that additional understanding. I am willing, and I think because it would be helpful, just doing a straw poll vote to provide additional information if that's helpful, or doing a motion. So I'd like to hear from other people. I'm not opposed to it. I would like to help the process just because this is complex.
Yeah, that's fair. Oh, Commissioner Borowski, go ahead.
You know, for me, I agree with Commissioner Fragola. Although I think one way that we could possibly get there would be I could move opposition to the 10-year plan. So we can say we're in favor of the Planning Commission is in favor of option 3, but in opposition to option 4. I don't know. I mean, we can rank it. It doesn't matter. Again, does it cloud it, or does it cloud the issue, or does it add clarity to the issue? It's hard to say. I think for me, the ranking, the only positive aspect for me to the ranking is that I believe most of us would go to option 4 would be our least favorite option, and that would be the clarity that I would like to bring to council.
So I'm going to ask the question of staff real quick, and then Commissioner Beeson, I'll go to you. But my question is, without context, I guess I'm trying to understand how that would be helpful to council. So maybe Rebecca or Terry, go ahead.
Rebecca, jump in if you think differently. But the reason I think it would be helpful for staff, at least, to have your rankings is because of the Lane County Planning Commission and giving us a fuller picture of how the two bodies break out in their support for the various things would at least help us think about how to present that to the decision makers. Do you agree, Rebecca?
Yeah, like I said, we primarily did this for the county to help them in their decision making. Assuming that they will do the ranking tomorrow, it would be nice to be able to have rankings from both bodies to provide that clear image of where you both stand. That said, you reached a consensus recommendation. That's all I ever really hoped for. So the rest is icing on the cake, and it's really up to you as decision makers how you prefer to go.
And I'll just jump in and say there's certainly no legal reason for it. I was a proponent of asking you for it or providing the motion simply because I could see a scenario where we are in front of the elected officials. We have the board and the city council together, and the board is given this packet of how their planning commissioners ranked everything, and the city council is not. And we as staff wouldn't want to have to say, well, we didn't ask our planning commission for that. I think it's perfectly acceptable based on what I've heard from you all. Now that we've had this discussion, for us staff to respond to that future question by saying they were unanimous in their recommendation for a 27-year and didn't feel that ranking was that relevant in light of that kind of vote. It's just not the scenario we have with the County Planning Commission tomorrow. And so we wanted to make sure we were offering the electeds all the information that you all felt was appropriate given your counterpart.
Let me jump in really quick, Emily, because I want to ask a question, but also, well, two questions. I believe the ETAC took the same votes. They ranked theirs as well. And so policymakers will have the ETAC's answers there. But I'm wondering, because I actually did respond via email with my rankings. And I'm just wondering if that would be sufficient, if all of the commissioners were to be able to respond back, just so, I mean, would you need a vote from this commission to be able to say, we give you permission to share, you know, our individual answers as you see fit? Or does that actually need to be a motion and a vote? And then we actually need to share that right here.
Yeah, it's a good point because your ranking is now in the public record. And not everyone's is. So, you know, you can proceed as you wish. It is fine if individual planning commissioners want to simply submit something to Rebecca that has their ranking. After this recommendation has been made, those can be put into the public record and not relate to the vote.
Okay, Commissioner Beeson, and then we'll followed by Commissioner Taylor.
Well, you'd asked earlier for us to kind of weigh in on this. I guess I could go either way, but first off, several of us have already provided our rankings, as has been observed, maybe even 3 or 4 of us. So I would be fine either way. I think as long as it's conveyed to the Planning Commission over at Lane County and the council and so on, that we've reached a consensus decision. And I think that decision's been pretty clear. I also, and I think John raised this, you know, conveying that option 4 was, or the 10-year option was not something any of us really wanted. But I think beyond that, I guess I'm not sure I personally find it all that confusing to provide some additional information to them. And so I'd probably kind of land on the side of providing additional information if it's something the staff thinks would help them. So I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Kristen.
So I agree with Commissioner Beeson. So I don't necessarily think it needs to be a motion because if I count right, 4 of us have already divulged it. I actually like transparency better. So sending an email, just because people are watching now, so it'll be both in this venue as well as written when staff writes it. I think I'd rather go around. Straw poll vote is just fine if people are open to each of us going through and ranking. And obviously there's a handful of us that have already done it, just to provide staff with that additional information, considering the meeting is tomorrow, the county meeting.
Okay. So straw poll. Yeah. So maybe a straw poll, are folks comfortable just going around commissioners one by one and just giving us, just for the record, for the final, so that staff can use it for at their discretion? Are we comfortable just naming off our choices in order? I'm going to just do this for folks who are comfortable with that. And anyone not comfortable with that? Okay, Commissioner Fragla. So it looks like straw poll our straw poll shows that we were comfortable. Okay, sorry, there's a lot going on. John, did you raise your hand to be in the queue or to vote? Okay, so I have Commissioner Borofsky. Go ahead.
Yeah, the only reason that I'm hesitant about doing the straw poll is because we may end up in the same situation that Lane County is, where you've got 4 of us that want to go one way and 3 that want to go the other way, and we're sending a mixed message when we've actually sent a strong message. So that's my concern. You know, if I say yes, I'd like, and I'm not saying this, but I would like option 3, and then my next one is option 1, and Commissioner Edwards is I like option 3 and then option 2.
Mm-hmm.
Again, you're in the same position that Lane County's at, where you've got a commission that has sent a clear and strong message on which option they want, and then wishy-washy on the rest. So,
well, right, I agree. I think that's why I was asking the question, because as a matter of public record, I've already divulged my choices, but I also made it very clear that I would support 3 of the 4 options based on consensus, because I do recognize that I value consensus through this process. So I don't know how that would be helpful, and I guess I would defer to staff. So maybe Rebecca, do you really feel that you having that information to be able to compile it in a way that helps to really put context around that would be helpful? I maybe want to hear your thoughts on that.
I mean, I don't really have more information to share than we've already shared. Terry expressed how we could use it, how it could be comparable with the county information that we're sharing. You're right that that it would show more nuanced voting. It would also show the scale, right? Because we're gonna, presumably with ranking, we would add it all up. So it would show your top choice and your bottom choice. So that would be the additional information I would think that it would convey. If you think that is important to convey to council, is not only your most preferred option, but your least preferred option. But I defer to you. Well, I'm sensing mixed comfort and discomfort about this. So I'm really going to defer back to the Planning Commission on whether you wish to do this or not.
Okay, I do have Lisa, Commissioner Fragolet in the queue, because I think you probably wanted to provide some sort of context for your answer.
Yeah, I did. Thank you. So I would like to say that I think the ranked voting will provide an opportunity to not only be a distraction, but I do think there are some people that will politicize it. And by taking a very, very clear stance that we're committed to the 27-year option, we're committed to the work that, and are recommending the work that ETAC has done, we provide a clear recommendation, right? Like John said, like Commissioner Borofsky said, ETAC has really dug down into this. We've taken the time to dig down into this. City Council doesn't have that same opportunity. And I actually think a clear recommendation is very, very helpful to the City Council, and could potentially be really helpful to the County Planning Commission. So I actually think the ranking does exactly the opposite of what people are guessing it may do. And I want to provide clear guidance to the City Council. And I actually think that's what they want from us as well.
Okay, That's great. Thanks, Lisa. So I have Commissioner Isaacson, and then I'm going to make a recommendation and see if that would be sufficient with staff and Emily in particular. So Dan, go ahead.
So I want to make sure where we're at. Is there a motion on the, we've already suggested what we're recommending the 27-year option. Can I offer either a friendly amendment or an actual amendment on the rationale why? In other words, we offer, here's our recommendation is for this body, and here's the rationale why, and it be that it was the ETAC vote that, and the research that went into that as the reason why?
No.
So
I don't know.
Although it kind of felt like a vote, my understanding in right in reaching the last one, the last that you made, it wasn't an actual motion seconded, and we're not discussing a motion right now. You know, it's telling to me that it has come, you've had this discussion this long and no one has made the motion. And so that may be a good indication that you're done discussing. You know, I think at this point, there's been enough discussion that if someone wants to make the motion to share rankings, you can have a discussion about that and vote on whether or not to do that, or just no motion should be made. You've had a lot of discussion on it. And I don't know what time it is. And I also don't know how to stop sharing my screen. Have I stopped sharing my screen?
Yes, yeah. We're not seeing your screen.
Thank you.
I might make the suggestion, I'm not going to make a motion, but I might make the suggestion that those of us who have already publicly shared our options can make that available to staff for their discretion, because it sounds like staff's also not quite sure how they want to use that. But I would also maybe suggest, and Emily, you can tell me if I'm off base here, but if you want that to be part of the public record, you could share that with staff in an email, that, you know, that way they have that information, and if they choose to use it. Or we could take a formal, you know, we don't believe that this information is relevant or helpful.
Yeah, I mean, to be clear, it's once those of you who have said you're ranking at today's meeting, or who have emailed it or will email it, those are all part of the public record, and whether staff says anything about them at all to the council will have those materials. So, you know, that I think staff have heard loud and clear that compiling them into the rankings of, you know, the Planning Commission is fraught with more concern than we may have anticipated. And that's been a very good, important outcome of this discussion, even though it may be useful with the county. I do want to clarify with the county, they hadn't been asked to rank. The way it went down was I moved the 30-year option, second, vote failed. I moved the 27-year option, second, vote failed. So they went through each of the options and none of them could pass. And so in that situation, we think this ranking would at least provide something. I think legally it is unnecessary, and given the concerns that you've had, I would call the question and say, does anyone want to make a motion and take it?
Okay, Commissioner Taylor, I see you. Sorry.
That's all right. I would like to make a motion to have a straw poll vote. I hear all of the challenges by other commissioners, and I think that staff, I respect and think staff can actually communicate that in the documentation passed on to City Council, that level of concern, and that really our consensus was the most critical. So because of that, I still think it's valuable information, and the City Council doesn't always just take what we say. The nuances sometimes are important in the discussion. So I'm going to move that we take a straw poll vote and emphasize that staff identify and explain in the explanation to City Council what this process and what the concerns were, and that we did this just to help procedurally to be consistent.
Okay. So motion for a straw poll. Do we have a second? I do not see a second.
I'll second.
Commissioner Beeson seconded. Okay, so
Second.
all of those in favor, and this is a straw poll, right? Of doing a straw.
I'm really confused. You don't need a motion for a straw poll. So what are we voting on here?
Emily, you're muted, and I'm sorry, I have a dog barking.
Sorry. No, I think that Kristen's using the term straw poll to mean that everyone would provide their ranking, not to mean that this is an informal request. I think you have a formal motion. Commissioner Beeson has seconded it. And right now you could have some discussion or you could just vote. And the question is, should we provide rankings?
Okay. So the question is, should we provide rankings? And I'm going to call for a vote. All of those in favor, raise your hand. That believe we should provide rankings. I'm seeing 2. All of those opposed to providing rankings. I'm seeing 5. Okay. So the motion fails. It's a puppy. Okay, so the motion fails, and that's that. There's information in the public record if folks are really interested in digging in, I suppose, but I think that's where we've left it. Okay, with that, I'm going to see if there is any items from staff or commissioners that we need to. Commissioner Isaacson, did you?
No.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Terry, you're smiling and you're unmuted, so you must have something to say.
Yes. Well, just
Okay.
moving on to item C on the agenda, as you were talking about other items from staff, the only update I have for you is a reminder about your next meeting. And it is scheduled for August 24th on Monday via Zoom, and Janessa Dragovich will be bringing you deliberations and action on the digital sign codes amendment. And then you don't have any items on your September 8th agenda yet, and next meeting would be September 15th. And that's it for planning director and staff updates.
Okay, thank you. And for those of you, I forgot to mention that Terry is filling in for Alyssa today. So I do have Commissioner Fragola and Commissioner Borofsky in the queue. So go ahead, Lisa.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I did want to mention to planning commissioners that the River Road and Santa Clara CAC, Community Advisory Committee, is meeting tomorrow on August 18th from 6 to 8 p.m. via Zoom to discuss the neighborhood plan. I do think that they've been slowed down a little bit by the pandemic, but I think we've heard a lot about this group, and if nothing, they are persistent. And so they're meeting to discuss the draft action plan intro, and they're looking at reviewing priority code actions that are not included and reviewing maps of tax lots for potential rezoning, and some potential reviews of other topic areas. So they're still moving forward, and that meeting is tomorrow night.
Thanks, Lisa. John.
Thank you. Terry, just, and you may not have the answers to this, but if you could relay it on to Alyssa. I'm just curious as far as process for the commission going forward. You know, we're in the middle of August now. When are we planning on doing elections? Are we planning on an updated work plan? We've got new commissioners on board that I don't think have participated in a commission retreat. These things I think are important moving forward. I know that with the way we are with the Zoom, and a lot of these things are kind of getting pushed, and it concerns me a little bit. I would like to, just put it out there, where are we at as far as policies and the commission moving forward into the next year as far as where we're going.
Thank you. I'll pass that on to Alyssa, and I'll also let you know we have started talking about potential dates for a number of those items. And we were waiting on bringing you an updated work plan until the city's budget process was complete. And now that that is complete, we're starting to outline that. So we do have room in our agenda over the fall to schedule those items. Thanks.
Yeah, and for that, I mean, just the subcommittees and those types of things, because I know I'm going to be weaning off some, some things, and so it may be appropriate to try and bring some of the newer commissioners onto some of the ones that I've been involved with, and so that the overlap isn't quite as substantial.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Is there anything else from staff or commission? All right, seeing none, I'm going to go ahead and let you all have the rest of your day. We're a little early, so we'll go ahead and adjourn our meeting. Thanks, everybody.